Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be covering a book called Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor. This is an Elseworlds story out of continuity. It's written by Mark Waid, a very great writer. I've covered a few books of his on my channel, so check out Irredeemable and Kingdom Come if you want more Mark Waid. The artist on this book is Bryan Hitch, who is a really solid superhero artist usually. I think one of his most famous books was The Ultimates in Marvel's Ultimate Universe comics there. But yeah, so in this Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor book, Lex Luthor is dying and he goes to Superman for help. And even though Lex is a dick and a bastard and a villain, Superman, he's going to do the Boy Scout thing and try and save Lex's life and find a cure for Lex. And this book is a very great exploration of the relationship between Superman and Lex. Mark Waid really nails Superman and what he's all about in his Boy Scout kind of ways, but he also really nails Lex being a dick here. And Lex is kind of fun in this book of how villainous he is, but also we're seeing a little bit of heart on Lex too. So this is a really fun book, and I think this is going to be going down in my top 10 Superman stories of all time. It has really solid stuff. So let's dive into it. Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor. Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, Issue 1. Clark Kent is in his office in the Daily Bugle. He remembers a moment in his childhood where, back in Smallville, him and Lex were arguing, and Lex seemed to toss Clark outside and lock him out of his home. We'll return to that later though. In the current day, off the coastal islands of Bangladesh, a mysterious giant flying machine rises out of the ocean, and it begins causing destruction to the coast. Clark Kent quickly departs the Daily Bugle, changes into his Superman outfit, and he flies to Bangladesh to stop this machine of destruction. Superman wondered what were the origins of this machine. The machine's hull was lined with lead, which blocked Superman's X-ray vision. So Superman tore the machine apart, and what he saw inside was hardly a surprise. Inside was Lex Luthor. He was the one behind all this destruction. Lex asks Superman, "Hey, you got a minute?" Superman could sense something was off with Lex, but there was something else that Superman had to deal with at the moment. The island here he was trying to save was still on the brink of total collapse. It was about to be devastated by earthquakes, which were side effects of Lex's machine. So Supes, to counter these earthquakes, began drilling into the earth at super speed, something called echo chambers, angled precisely to disrupt the waves of propagation. So in a sense, Superman was able to create a kind of earthquake reflector, immediately ending the tremors that were harming the island. Finally, with that taken care of, Superman returns to Lex. Lex comments, "Wow, nicely done." Superman questions why. Lex answers, "Why? I wanted to get your attention." Superman, upset, says, "By nearly slaughtering countless innocent people?" Lex to this answers, "Good thing you saved absolutely everybody then, or did you?" Superman sensed a mocking tone, and then he remembered that in India they had been developing a combat machine exactly like this one, except that one was manned. Lex then smiles. Superman grabs Lex and asks, "How many corpses are in here, Lex? How could those technicians' lives mean nothing to you? And this was all to get my attention? For what reason? For what possible reason?" Lex responds, "You have a microscopic vision. Look at me. Look hard. Examine my cardiovascular system, my nervous system, my cellular structure. What do you see?" Superman, he does so, and he realizes, "You're dying." Lex answers, "Very good, Doctor. Rapid cellular decay. Quite rapid." Superman asks, "How did this happen?" Lex answers, same old. I was experimenting with some kryptonite. You know, a Tuesday. It was the gift of a recent meteor shower. I was bombarding it with various forms of radiation in hopes of getting results I could synthesize. It backfired rather unexpectedly and rather badly. I was bathed in a rather unique combination of rays, from up and down the electromagnetic spectrum. Along with fate only knows what chemicals and pathogens it may have combined with in my lab. When I came to, an exhaustive round of blood work confirmed the worst. The cells in my body were burning out. Lex assures Superman there's no lingering radiation, so Lex is not a danger to Superman now. But Lex is indeed dying. Lex continues to explain that he left no turn unstoned to try and reverse his diagnosis. But as difficult and humbling as it is to admit, the greatest intellect in human history came up with nothing. Lex is referring to himself when he says that. Lex continues, "At the rate I'm deteriorating, I estimate I have at best only a few days to live." Superman, he thinks and responds, "I'm sorry to hear." Lex to this says, "See, right there. There's that signature Superman compassion. The whole world's going to be dancing in the streets at this news, but not you. And that is what I'm banking on. That Superman won't let me die. In our long history, you've consistently demonstrated many irrational traits, but only one that's utterly unfathomable to me. Superman always answers cries for help, always puts others first. He saves people. He made a solemn vow to hold all lives sacred. Even mine." Superman suspects this is a trap. Lex tells Superman to use his special senses and read his body. Superman does so, and he can tell that Lex is telling the truth. Superman comments, "You would never willingly come to me for anything." Lex responds, "That's what I would have said a week ago, but I suppose terminal illness prescribes a radical shift in priorities. I'm willing to lower myself in indebtedness to you, my worst enemy, for two reasons. First, and almost critically, at the end of the day, I refuse to acknowledge a universe without me in it." Superman, he warns Lex, "Make no mistake, if I say yes, if you live, you'll answer for your crimes, all of them. I'll see to it personally." Lex to this says, "Oh, I've taken this into account. And what are you, asking me to promise full surrender in return? Are you actually making your aid conditional? Of course not. That's not you. Well, you're gonna help me find a cure?" Superman, he thinks and responds, "I don't really have a choice, so yes, but we keep this between us." Lex to this says, "Too late. See, I've been broadcasting our conversation live to every corner of the earth. I just couldn't resist seeing the look on your face when you heard the global reaction as you announced to a world that loves you that you are about to save the life of Earth's single most despised villain. All around the globe, many react to the news in horror that Superman is going to attempt to save Lex Luthor's life." Superman says, "You're venomous. Suppose I said no." Lex to this says, "But you couldn't. You're predictable. And now the world will finally see how easy you are to hate. It's not that difficult, frankly. I've loathed you since the moment I first laid eyes on you." Superman to this thinks this wasn't true. Superman then remembers his time back in Smallville, when both him and Lex Luthor grew up there, and Lex had no idea that Clark Kent, his classmate, was secretly Superman. We see back then, when they were both teenagers, some boys were picking on Lex. Clark, using his powers, managed to free Lex from his bullies. Lex didn't even know this, though. Lex, he did not treat Clark with respect. He called him Old MacDonald, which was a joke about Clark growing up on a farm and being a yokel. This didn't bother Clark, though. He just cheerfully replied, "E-I-E-I-O." Clark and young Lex walked downtown Smallville. Lex asked Clark, "Why aren't you at home milking something?" Clark answers, "I got an hour's detention for arguing with the teacher about my grade." Clark shows Lex his test paper. Lex reads it and says, Your answer's right. The question's wrong. Nobody else in class caught that? Clark answers, just me and the teacher, and she didn't want to listen. Lex, feeling bad for Clark, says, Jesus, I realize that calling you the smartest cowhand in Smallville is damning with faint praise, Kent, but promise me you'll get out of here as fast as you can. Clark responds, I like it here. If you just give it a chance, you will too. Lex, aghast, says, here? A village of cavemen? Bah! Superman reflects on his and Lex's relationship back then. Lex was quirky, prone to wild mood swings. He was the kind of mind that came along once every 100 years, so full of information that it simply had no room for emotional intelligence. Clark was the closest thing Lex had to a friend on those rare occasions when Lex would tolerate Clark. Lex was never malevolent back then, just arrogant. The folks of Smallville were good people, they just couldn't handle Lex's intensity. Lex saw it differently, though. Their disdain of him was simply more proof that he was too smart for this world. So, Lex pondered worlds beyond. He was obsessed with proving the existence of extraterrestrial life. Unaware that the only boy in town who felt any kinship with him whatsoever was all the evidence he needed. Clark reflected back then that the most frustrating thing about being different from everyone else was how he had to keep so much of himself locked inside. Not just the fact that he had powers, but the way the world appeared to him when he used those powers. Clark thinks, I tried explaining these things to Ma and Pa, talking about the science of it, but God bless them, it was just a little over their heads. I would have given anything to share all that with anyone who'd actually understand, but there'd been nobody. Clark then thought that maybe Lex would be able to understand him, and understand what it would be like to have his powers and help him think it through. But Clark was afraid to tell Lex, but he wanted to tell him. At some point, Clark became worried because Lex stopped going to school. He's just locked himself in this lab of his, and he's been there for weeks. And he's been getting deliveries from all over the world. He's building something big. Something around a weird rock. So we see back then, Lex had kryptonite, and he was experimenting on it. We jump back now to the current day. Superman flies Lex Luthor to the Arctic, to his Fortress of Solitude. He brings Lex inside. When Lex sees the inside of the fortress, he says, Oh my, this is quite the treehouse, isn't it? I never took you for a hoarder. I can't believe you let me inside. Superman answers, I had to. It's the only way to reach Kandor. Kandor is the capital city of Krypton, and before the planet's destruction, the villain Brainiac shrank the entire city using advanced technology and stole it, placing the city in a bottle to preserve it. Eventually, Superman recovered Kandor and kept it in his Fortress of Solitude, hoping one day to restore the city and its inhabitants to their original size. So Superman, he shrinks both him and Lex down, and they enter the bottle city of Kandor with all the other Kryptonians that are there. As the Kryptonians have a very strong scientific knowledge, and they may know how to cure Lex from his ailments. Lex asks Superman, is that why you keep this here? You like having this city handy when you get homesick? Superman answers, not especially. At first I was eager to explore my people's culture, but despite my protestations, the Kandorians hold their liberator so ridiculously in awe that it's impossible to effectively assimilate. The Kryptonians are a wondrously advanced planet, but they are so advanced because cold science, not humanism, was its universal religion. They revered knowledge so fundamentally that they had a tendency to sometimes value science over compassion. You'd like it here. Well, the Kryptonians in the bottle city of Kandor greet Superman warmly. Superman has the great scientists there perform all sorts of tests on Lex, see if they can diagnose him and come up with a possible treatment. The Kandorians there do their various tests, but they can find no cure. One of the Kandorian scientists explains on Lex's condition. The good news is, whatever sickness is consuming this Earthling system is unlikely to be transmitted to another organism. That is unfortunate because it is feeding directly off of his unique DNA and metastasizing at an exponential rate independent of his natural metabolism, meaning not even a cryogenic state is an option. He will begin to age more rapidly as his organs gradually fail. There is no way to nullify the disease. Afterwards, Lex and Superman discuss Lex's options. Lex, he questions, "Do these overrated wonder wizards of yours have any way to completely arrest my metabolism?" Superman, he thinks, if they can stop Lex's metabolism, they can at least pause the disease from making him get even more sick. Superman tells Lex, "I can think of only one way, but it's the old saw. The cure is worse than the disease." Lex, intrigued, asks, "Worse than dying? How?" Superman answers, "I'll let you be the judge." Superman then brings Lex into the Phantom Zone. The Phantom Zone is a parallel dimension used by Kryptonians as a humane form of incarceration. In this ghostly limbo-like realm, Kryptonians cannot interact with the physical world, but they still remain alive, conscious, and they are unable to age. They are also unable to speak within the Phantom Zone, but they can communicate through telepathy, through their thoughts. After Superman explains the basics to Lex, Lex replies, "So here I can exist indefinitely without aging or requiring sustenance, am I correct?" Superman answers, "Largely, but as you can guess from the telepathy, your mental state is amplified here. They say given enough determination and willpower, it's possible to make yourself temporarily solid enough to interact with the terrain. If you remain in the zone, that'll buy us some time, and don't worry, they can't hurt you." That is when Lex then sees all the many Kryptonian prisoners there, also in the Phantom Zone. Superman explains to Lex, "Every once in a while, this dimension aligns with ours long enough for the prisoners to get a hazy glimpse of Earth. When that happens, they focus enough attention on me that I'm confident they've learned who you are. Me, they loathe. They'll welcome you with open arms." The infamous General Zod then makes an appearance. Zod greets Superman saying, "You're a fool for coming here, Kal-El." Zod then orders the other inmates here, his army, to attack Superman, their jailer. Under Zod, the enraged prisoners had learned to pool their mental energy with such white-hot intensity. Not only had they made themselves solid, they'd done it to Superman as well. So all of a sudden, all these inmates are able to tackle Superman and start attacking him. Superman screams out, Lex, help me!" Superman earlier said that Lex, maybe after being in the Phantom Zone for a very long time, would be able to start interacting with objects here. But Lex, he just says, "Psh, determination and willpower. Easy as pie." So in a matter of moments, Lex is able to grab something off of the ground and interact with it. He then walks over to General Zod and holds a sharp knife-like rock up to Zod's throat. Lex then orders Zod to call off his hounds. General Zod is surprised. Lex hates Superman more than all of them. Zod tells Lex, "You buffoon, this is your moment." Lex answers, "I'm not saying no to your offer in the grand scheme. I'm simply demanding a rain check until my fortune changes. Now call them off." Zod's soldiers let Superman go. Superman begins attempting to leave the Phantom Zone. The plan is that Lex Luthor is going to stay here in the Phantom Zone and not die, and Superman's going to try to find a cure, then he'll come back for Lex later. Somehow, though, Lex has managed to piss off Zod and all the other Kryptonians there so much that with the combined focus of their mental willpower, they all begin chanting, "Depart, depart, depart." So as Superman leaves the Phantom Zone through that combined Kryptonian willpower of all the prisoners there, Lex is chucked out of the Phantom Zone as well. Superman, a little shocked, says, well that was new. Lex, how did they do that? Lex answers, let's just say they rolled up the welcome mat. They hated me so much they were able to combine their willpower enough to shove me out. Well, Lex is no longer in stasis. He's still on the trajectory to die in a couple of days, so him and Superman have to continue to move and find a cure. Before Lex and Superman leave the bottle city of Kandor to attempt to find another cure somewhere else, one of the Kandorian scientists there asks Superman, even in Kandor we are aware of Lex Luthor's limitless capacity for evil. Surely your world would be safer should he expire, would it not? Superman answers, probably. The scientist questions, well then why are you so focused on such a creature that you would risk so much? Superman then remembers once again, back to Smallville. Lex is in some sort of lab conducting an experiment when they were kids, and Clark is banging on the door saying, Lex, let me in, please, open the door. I'm sorry, Lex, forgive me. This is my fault. Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, Issue 2. Over at the Daily Bugle, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane are discussing the latest news that Superman is attempting to save Lex Luthor's life. An online poll asks readers, should Superman save Luthor? With 89% being against it. Jimmy asks Lois that shouldn't Superman know the world thinks he's making the wrong call here? Lois responds, it wouldn't matter, Jimmy. Superman doesn't decide who he helps based on voting. He's doing what he believes is right. We jump back on over to Superman and Lex. They are continuing their search for someone that may be able to save Luthor. Superman says he's going to take Lex to the smartest man he's ever met. So, Superman and Lex travel to the 31st century, to the Legion of Superheroes. The Legion of Superheroes is a team of teenage heroes from the 30th and 31st century who protect the galaxy and are inspired by the legacy of Superman. They often recruit young heroes from many planets, each with unique powers, and use technology like a Legion flight ring to aid their missions. This Legion flight ring is something Superman used here to help navigate him and Lex to the Legion. Superman then introduces Lex to various members of the Legion. But the one Superman most wants Lex to meet is Brainiac 5, aka Quirrell Dox. Brainiac 5 is actually indeed smarter than Lex. He has a mind that contains data gathered from thousands of worlds throughout the United Planets and beyond. And he is also a descendant of Superman's old enemy, Brainiac, except he uses his genius for good. Brainiac 5 asks Lex to sit in something he calls a Medi chair. Then he has Superman form a telepathic link with another hero named Saturn Girl, and then through Superman's eyes, Brainiac 5 analyzes beyond molecules and atoms, and he assesses Luthor at a deeper level. We step away from this and go to another flashback to Smallville. Lex Luthor invited Clark Kent into his lab to show him what he had been working on. Luthor was obsessed with proving the existence of extraterrestrial life. So he invented some sort of wormhole machine that he believed would help him reach life on other universes. And part of making this machine work was Lex manipulating kryptonite, which he discovered in the form of a meteorite that landed in a nearby farm. Lex explains to Clark that this will allow him to rewrite the laws of physics. It gives off a unique radiation that's inexplicably clean, and it can power his machine. This was the first time Clark ever encountered kryptonite, and he did not know the negative effect it would have on his body. So all of a sudden, there in Lex's lab, Clark started feeling ill, and he started cowering from the rock. And Lex, he took offense to this. Lex started yelling at Clark, saying, "What, you ignorant jackass? Get away from me, you goddamn hick farm boy. You think I don't know that look? You're afraid of me because you think I'm a freak." Clark tried to explain himself to Lex that wasn't it, but Lex didn't want to hear it. He sent Clark out of his lab, and he yelled, "You're just like the rest of them. I'd tell you to go to hell, you pathetic yokel, but you already live there. Get out!" With Clark expelled from Lex's lab, Lex fires up his machine, hits the kryptonite, and seems to open a portal to another world. Lex was momentarily happy, but then the machine exploded. Clark, stuck outside the lab, was banging on the door trying to get in. He was saying aloud, "Lex, let me in. This is my fault. This is all my fault." Lex, he did survive the blast, but he got engulfed in flames and he lost his hair. And this, my friends, is the origin of Lex Luthor's baldness. Well, the flames engulfed Lex and it blew up the lab, and Clark was knocked unconscious from that blast. And when Clark woke up, Lex was gone. And that was the last time anyone in Smallville ever heard from Lex Luthor again, until he eventually made a name for himself in Metropolis. We jump back now to the 31st century. Brainiac 5 has finished his analysis of Luthor. He explains that the pathogens inside Luthor are drawing energy from somewhere outside itself and turning Luthor into a human furnace of sorts. And every cure that Brainiac 5 attempts inflames Luthor's lymphatics and constricts his vascular system to the point of nearly causing a stroke. Brainiac 5 continues and says, "I've seen similar symptoms in other species. Unfortunately, while there are potential remedies, 21st century Earthlings are too fragile to withstand them. You've finally given me a problem I can't solve." Luthor, annoyed, says, "We traveled 1,000 years for that. Can't you idiots at least Google my fate?" Superman, he says to this, "It's a fair question. Records should provide a shortcut to his cure." Brainiac 5 answers, I would that we could, but Earth's historical data has been lost or corrupted more than once over the last 10 centuries. I wish I could offer more. Just know that this man is truly your enemy. Stay vigilant." Well, with that being said, Superman grabbed Luthor and traveled back to their time. When they left, though, Saturn Girl talked with Brainiac 5. She asked, "Earth's historical data wasn't lost or corrupted. We know full well what became of Luthor. Why didn't you tell Superman?" Brainiac 5 simply answers, "Because I knew what it would do to him." Superman and Lex then arrive back in their own time, and they go to Wonder Woman's home in Themyscira. Wonder Woman pleads with Superman to stop. There are warrants out for Lex's arrest. He is no longer Superman's problem. Superman responds, "Diana, I respect what you're saying, and he will be delivered and he will pay for his crimes. You have my word on that. But I need to bring him in alive. I've heard it said the Amazons on Paradise Island have a unique therapeutic technology, a purple ray, capable of healing all ills and wounds. As your friend, I ask that you grant me access." Wonder Woman punches Superman with all of her might and yells, "How dare you! People look to you to protect them!" Superman and Wonder Woman begin tussling, and Lex, nearby, comments to himself, "Ugh, and here I am without a camera. I'd make a fortune streaming this." Wonder Woman then argues, "No matter how much we want to, we can't save everyone. You helped so many of us come to grips with that. Every moment of every day, there are people all around the world who die because Superman's not there for them. Why does this have to be any different? There is no sin in simply allowing fate to take its course in making humanity safer. The world trusts you. Superman, he answers, yes. And do you know why? Because I never let them see me as a weapon. All it takes, Diana, all it takes to obliterate that trust is the sight of me willfully allowing one single mortal being to come to harm. Because then it becomes, he passed judgment on them. Will he pass judgment on me? Wonder Woman is swayed by this argument. She tells Superman, all right, for you, I'll take him. You go up to a volcano or something. Wonder Woman then takes Luthor and flies him to this purple ray. She puts him under the ray, seeing if it will heal him. And while he is under there, she wraps the lasso of truth around Lex, and the two of them have a conversation. She comments that Lex is radiating fear. Lex responds, I am scared. Goddamn lasso of truth. I'm not ready to go down. This was not the end I envisioned. Wonder Woman slyly replies, you thought you would die on a golden throne with all life on Earth under your boot heel? Lex to this says, you're thinking too small. I'm on the cusp of mastering interstellar travel. This puny mudball can't be my burial ground. It cannot. It's not fair. I'm dying, meanwhile. For all we know, the Kryptonian is immortal, eager to keep looking down at us humans with godly disdain until the end of time. Wonder Woman then explains to Lex, do you really want to know what Superman sees when he looks at ordinary people, Luthor? He stands in awe, watching them go through their daily lives without his powers, taking risks just by crossing the street or climbing a ladder. In his eyes, you soldier through the darkest times without super strength. You face unfathomable challenges without invulnerability. You're made of tissue paper, and yet you can do anything. He doesn't see you as inferior. If anything, he marvels at your bravery. You're his heroes. Lex, annoyed by this answer, says, you're lying. Wonder Woman, who has the lasso of truth wrapped around her arm as well, says, no, I'm not. Eventually, Superman returns, and Wonder Woman explains that the purple ray did not end up healing Lex. So Superman and Lex leave to try their next gambit on a way to cure Lex. Superman makes Lex put on a special suit, and then they travel to the bottom of the ocean. Only they are not going to see Aquaman, as maybe you would expect. They are going to a place called Tritonus, ruled over by a different king named King Ronal. Superman there meets with an old love interest of his named Lori Lemaris. She is a mermaid from this Tritonus and was an actual early love interest of Superman in the comics. When Superman greets Lori, the two of them get really close with one another. Lex is a little weirded out. He says, I thought you were all about Lois What's-Her-Face. Are you telling me Superman is a side piece? Superman and this Lori are like touching heads. It's almost romantic seeming. Lex says, whoa, suddenly I'm in a romance novel? We came all the way here so you could look into each other's eyes? For God's sake, I'm not your wingman. Stop ignoring me. That is when King Ronal swims over to Lex. Ronal tells Lex, that woman you are denigrating is Lori Lemaris, my bride. Lex says, I'm not the one moving in on your territory, Nemo. King Ronal tells Lex, Superman and Lori are old and dear friends. He is merely communicating his needs. Lex comments, no kidding. So Superman communicates with this Lori telepathically and explains the situation, and she decides she will help. She then says, very well, legend has it what you seek can be found in the magical garden of Beletre. Around it stands a legend familiar to even the children of Tritonus. There and only there grows the fruit of Arion, which, it is said, healed the mad king, Beletre, of the greatest illness. Superman says, very well, show me where it is. But Lori tells Superman to stay. She'll go. And as she swims away, King Ronal tells Superman, we do not often refer to the fruit's home as the Garden of Beletre, Superman. We refer to it as the Garden of Death. That is when Superman realizes that it's actually going to be very dangerous to get this fruit, and this Lori is taking on that burden herself, trying to protect Superman. Well, Superman will not allow this, so he immediately starts swimming to where this Lori was going to go. And sure enough, this so-called Garden of Death contains a horrific sea monster with sharp teeth and tons of eyes and a tongue like vines. It grabs Superman and is going to kill him, but Lex actually traveled over there too and distracts the monster. Superman manages to escape the monster and laser it with his eyes. Eventually, Superman retrieves the fruit and takes Lex and returns back to King Ronal and Lori. Superman holds this mysterious fruit in his hands that potentially might cure Lex. Superman, he can't make heads or tails of its molecular structure. He warns Lex that ingesting it is a risk. Lex is willing to take those odds, so he eats the fruit and scarfs it down. Superman asks, "You feel anything?" Lex, he says, "Just a noise in my head." Lex then imagines some visions, and he actually starts tearing up. Lex, he spits out the fruit, and he goes, "Blech, blech, what was that? What were those visions in my head?" Lori then explains the Mad King's greatest illness, of course. It was a psychiatric curative, not a physical one. There are no secrets in a telepathic society like ours. Our minds are wholly open to each other. For a moment, Luthor experienced that he was one with the Tritonians. He felt all that we feel and saw all that we see. Superman adds on empathy as a foodstuff. Lex, disgusted and annoyed by this fruit's vision, says, "Ugh, it was horrible. All of them, they view you with such honor." As Superman and Lex prepare to leave, King Ronal talks with Lex some more. He explains Lori was one of Superman's great loves. Their romance ended in tears. Each and every time he visits us, he is reminded of that heartbreak. It causes him immense pain, and yet he never hesitates, not for an instant, to come to our aid. How can you not recognize such selflessness? Superman then grabs Luthor and they fly away. Over the next 24 hours, Superman and Lex crisscrossed the universe. Superman brought him to every alien race, every extraterrestrial terrain that he thought might help him, however slim the chance. It was all for naught, though. Lex just continued to grow weaker. Eventually, they returned to the Fortress of Solitude. Superman and Lex get a little snippy with each other. Lex comments, "You seem angry. That's not a typical Superman frame of mind." Superman responds, "I keep thinking about the time lost, time wasted, about all the gifts to humanity that you could have created if you'd taken another path." Lex to this says, "Maybe you should refocus your self-righteous energy and increase your chances of actually accomplishing something useful here." Superman, annoyed, says, "You have no idea how hard I'm working or why." Lex responds, "Why do you do anything? Probably because you're papering over some secret guilt." Superman tells Lex, "Shut up." Lex responds, "That's it, order me around. Order the poor puny human around. How dare you pretend you didn't stand in my way every day of my life, belittling me just by existing. What could I have been if not for you?" Superman grows sad for a moment and says, "You're right. All these years I've tried everything conceivable to reach you, Lex. Absolutely everything except this." Superman then changes his outfit and puts on his glasses and appears to Lex as Clark Kent. Lex's only kind of friend from his childhood in Smallville. All these years, Lex never knew Superman's secret identity as Clark. A very sick Lex Luthor questions, "Old MacDonald?" Clark responds, "E-I-E-I-O." Lex, shocked, says, "This is impossible. I'm hallucinating, a fever dream. You and And that milquetoast Kent can't possibly be the same? Clark responds, my secret's been right in front of you for years, Lex, but you have such a manic hatred for all things Smallville, it became your blind spot. To justify everything you've become since, you had to convince yourself that Smallville and everything in it was utterly meaningless, never worth a second's thought. If I had told you back then who I really was, then the proof of alien life your fragile mind was obsessing over, I could have saved you from that explosion. Instead, I made an error in judgment so immense it cheated this world of the kind of genius that comes along maybe once in a century. There's so much good you could have done, that we could have done together. I'm sorry, Lex. You can't believe it. He says, he's sorry. He's sorry for what? Typical. Somehow my life is all about you. Clark tells Lex to stop. But Lex just continues and says, I love that this has clearly tormented you, but you're making it out to be a tragedy. Are you joking? My life. You're the Superman who couldn't even get the girl. My life was great. Superman begins feeling a little ill, and he slams down on some crystals that are nearby in the fortress there. And one of the crystals actually cuts Superman's hand, and he starts bleeding. This shouldn't be possible with Superman's superior strength and tough skin, but there he is. He's bleeding. Superman then comments, my vision, my hearing, nothing's working. My powers, what happened to my powers? Superman's powers are failing. He doesn't know why. And then he looks at Lex and assumes that Lex is behind this. He says, you. Lex, he doesn't know what's going on though. He says, welcome to my world, I guess? Superman begins yelling, Luthor, you poisonous snake, what have you done? Superman then throws Lex across the room, and he yells, I knew it! Betrayal was the first thing that went through my head. But you tricked me. I'm an imbecile. You never would have come to me for help. I should have trusted my instincts. Lex tells Superman, will you listen to me? My hand to God, I have no idea what's going on here, none. Superman still assumes that Lex is lying. Then all of a sudden, the Fortress of Solitude begins to shake and partially collapse. The roof gives in, and Brainiac arrives. Not Brainiac 5, it's the evil one. Brainiac, he announces himself saying, no, he speaks truthfully. It is a trap, just not his. Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, Part 3 of 3. Superman narrates, many years ago, the people of the planet Kolu prioritized ambition over caution, as civilizations tend to do. They created AI so advanced it took control of their planet, and not peacefully. Kolu's new computer overlords, hungry to spread their rule throughout the cosmos, built an emissary, unemotionless xenopologists named Brainiac, who travels from world to world, miniaturizing and pirating population samples to calculate the planet's threat potential and steal its knowledge. Dangerous doesn't begin to describe Brainiac and his command over all things mechanical. Of all my enemies, there is only one whose ruthlessness genuinely terrifies me, and standing before him at his mercy, all Lex could say was, are you kidding me? So Brainiac was behind Lex Luthor's disease the entire time, although it secretly was a way to absorb Superman's powers. Lex says to Brainiac, you hustled me, you arranged for the accident that altered my cells, so that they would leech Superman's ability to process solar energy, leaving him powerless and me a human furnace. Brainiac responds, an accurate assessment. Lex questions further, for your plan to work, ideally it would have been best to infect someone closer to Superman. Perhaps that Lane or Olsen kid maybe? Why did you choose me? Brainiac answers, what you humans call professional courtesy. You always wanted to destroy Superman. This is my gift to you. Lex to this says, Making Superman just another human then? That's hardly destroying him. Brainiac responds, "Incorrect." He then knocks Superman down and continues, "Humanity is the ultimate poison. Thus, for Earthlings to be of genuine use to me, my drones must first modify them." Lex, curious, asks, "Modify how?" Brainiac didn't answer though. Superman then defiantly yells at Brainiac, "You won't get far with this. I have plenty of friends dedicated to protecting this world." Brainiac says, "Oh, I'm familiar, and they are every bit as helpless as you are." We see Brainiac seems to have captured the rest of the Justice League and the world's heroes in kind of tubes, keeping them captive. Superman doesn't have his powers, but he still does have his Legion of Superheroes flight ring, so he pops that on his fingers and then he grabs Lex and begins trying to fly away. As Superman is flying, Lex is trying to build some sort of anti-Brainiac weapon. He resents that he has been used by Brainiac, and he wants to work off some of that anger by getting back at him. Hours later, Superman's body was trying to fight off Brainiac's infection, giving him back just the tiniest fraction of his power. But he has to now conserve his energy as he does not have an unlimited supply, and eventually he will be fully powerless. All around the world, Brainiac's automatons are taking over, gathering humans and taking them hostage, and bringing them to his base to be processed. Eventually, Superman and Lex arrive at this supposed base. Lex has finished building whatever counter-Brainiac device he had developed. When Lex and Superman arrive in this base, when they see what Brainiac was up to, it is much more horrific than they thought. Brainiac is taking humans and modifying them into data storage units. The human brain is electrochemically unique. Its cerebral cortex possesses over 125 trillion synapses, giving each human 2.5 petabytes of overall memory capacity, enough to stock the entirety of a civilization's knowledge with room to spare. So Brainiac's drones are processing Earthlings all across the globe, harvesting brains to be kept eternally alive, so their gray cells may catalog for Brainiac the secrets of the universe. Superman and Lex fight through hordes of Brainiac's self-repairing drones. Lex's earlier weapon he created worked temporarily, but it wasn't enough. And despite the odds, Superman fighting fiercely with what remains of his power that is sapping away, but Brainiac's forces overwhelm him. Lex remarks bitterly that Brainiac's efficiency and adaptability are unmatched. The drones begin to heal and rebuild themselves. Amidst the chaos, Lex's anti-Brainiac device does help for a moment, giving them breathing room, but Superman and Lex realize they can't win this fight head-on, and they need a new plan. So Superman flies Lex away from the battlefield to a secret backup lab that Lex had hidden beneath the Metro Dam. Once in the lab, Lex struggles physically, but refuses to rest. He believes Brainiac is using a giant fusion reactor to power his global operation, and they must destroy it. On a video screen, Lex then shows Brainiac's ship in the sky that must be certainly turning the sun's rays into his own brand of transmittable energy. Lex says they need to smithereen that process. Lex proposes building a device, with Superman doing the manual labor work under Lex's weakened guidance. So, Superman gets to work building the device, and over time, Lex begins to reflect on his life with some sadness. He tells Superman, "You know, I wish you would have told me back in Smallville that you were who you were. I mean, it wouldn't have made a difference, though." Superman says, "Yes, it would have." Lex replies, again with the ego, "I admit, it might have been nice to not feel so much like an outsider, but I still ended up with everything I could have ever wanted." Superman comments, "Except my corpse." Lex laments, "Almost everything." Superman asks, how'd that work out for you in the end? Lex didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. Once the device is finished, Superman asks, so how exactly will this take out Brainiac's ship? Lex says, it won't. Not directly. We'd need more time and resources than we have. This device is for you and me. It enables genetic transference. It's matched specifically to the two of us. You put your hand in that sleeve and Brainiac's death trap reverses. The solar processing power goes back from me into you. Your cells and your powers return to normal, and then you can save the day. Superman asks, and what happens to you? Lex says, I die. Superman, shocked, says, unacceptable. You wasted our time on this? The entire world is endangered, you sociopath. All the possible solutions. Lex argues, killing me is the only one available. It's the only one, and it has to be done before my body shuts down altogether. Superman, he still refuses. He says it's still murder. But Lex argues, your ridiculous fairy tale ethics may bring you comfort, but they make no logical sense. Of course, Superman can trade one life to save 8 billion. The math here is not hard. Look, everybody wins in this scenario. The world wants me dead, humanity gets to live, and Brainiac gets his ass kicked by Superman. Superman is still refusing, but he continues tinkering with the machine. Eventually, despite everything, Superman and Lex activate the device together. The device was supposed to kill Lex and finally transfer those powers that were sapping away from Superman back into Superman so that he could save the day. But it turns out Superman did some last-minute tinkering with the machine. Once Lex and Superman wake up, Superman brings Lex to the roof, and Lex is still alive. Superman explains, I made last-minute adjustments to your machine. It reversed its flow. It didn't remove solar processing from your genetic code. Instead, it rewrote your entire cellular structure to match mine. With your machine destroyed, the effect is permanent. Your body's not only healed, but you have my powers. Lex, shocked, says, you're kidding. And then he tests out his new laser eye vision and blasts the laser. And then he says, my God, you're not kidding. Lex not only has heat vision, he also has strength and invulnerability. Superman says he couldn't let Lex die to save him, but now Lex has the power to help humanity himself. Lex is furious at first. He says, my God, it's not enough to force me to watch people worship you? Now you made me into you? But Superman challenges him. The world needs Lex to act, whatever his motives are, revenge, pride, or otherwise. Superman then asks, is Brainiac still transmitting to his drones? I can no longer process solar energy. What little power I have left needs conserving. Superman points in the sky and tells Lex to use his supervision and look. Lex, he does so, and he comments, this is unreal. I can make out the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It's beautiful. And yes, he is. So Lex and Superman join forces and fly into space together to confront Brainiac's mothership. Superman wearing the Legion ring to assist with the flying. As they approach Brainiac's fleet, Superman plans to handle the solar energy systems, while Lex will hack Brainiac's command network. While Superman is fighting more drones, Lex goes after Brainiac. He flies and tackles him, and then he grabs him and chucks him into a corner of the ship. Lex yells at Brainiac, you conned me, you poisoned me, and you made me literally watch thousands of people kiss Superman's ass. And worst of all, you very nearly made the two of us friends again. Brainiac stands up and asks, then you concur that friendship is a human concept and therefore toxic. Lex to this says, oh, shut up. Brainiac continues, I admit I had not foreseen your ability to salvage Superman's powers. Given that I am now facing an opponent with a far more ruthless nature, my odds of defeat have elevated, though not significantly. You have absorbed enough of the Kryptonians' genetics to leave you vulnerable to red solar radiation. Victory therefore remains mine. Brainiac then fires a red solar energy light from his body. This makes Lex slightly weak. Brainiac continues, the one variable I had not anticipated was Superman's inability to reach a rational conclusion. His solution to his powerlessness state made no logical sense. The people of Earth need him. They do not need you. Lex quips, oh, good God, even you take his side. Superman then yells out, Lex, if you're listening, grab onto something. I've got no choice but to put everything I have into one last shot. So Superman, with the last of his energies, blasts the ship with his heat vision. A big explosion rocks the ship. It shakes. With Brainiac off balance, Lex pressure welds some radiation shielding around that red sun gizmo of Brainiac's. Lex ends up flying with Brainiac all the way to the moon, and Lex, using his heat vision, manages to decapitate Brainiac's head. Eventually, with Brainiac's ship now exploded, Superman joins Lex on the moon. Lex, holding Brainiac's head, says, and scene. Superman tells Lex, you've been given a second chance at life, Lex, to determine the kind of man you're going to be going forward. Lex says, how about King of the World, Emperor of the Galaxy, Lord of all space and time? The possibilities are infinite, aren't they? Brainiac's decapitated head then says to Lex, They can be, Lex Luthor. Repair me, and I can slake your incalculable thirst for knowledge. Together, we can gather the secrets of the universe. Accompany me. Lex says, no thanks. I belong here. I beat you. Lex then chucks Brainiac's head behind him. Brainiac, now lying on the moon, says, hardly. In the event of total corporeal failure, my consciousness automatically uploads to a distant outpost. Given that you are still vulnerable to a red sun, I would recommend you fly to safety while my body self-destructs. So soon there on the moon, Brainiac's body self-destructs, exploding into a pool of red sun-like energy. And that was the last anyone ever saw of Lex Luthor. Brainiac lived on, his consciousness uploaded to a distant outpost. The eruption up there in space flattened hundreds of square miles. In the aftermath, Superman was discovered near the edge of the blast radius, injured but not seriously affected, other than still having the permanent loss of his powers. With the aid of Amazonian science, Earth's other heroes were freed from captivity and wasted no time in scrubbing clean any vestige of the horrors Brainiac had bestowed. 3 days later, Superman called a press conference to explain what had happened. After reassuring them that the crisis had passed, he then shocked the crowd by announcing that this would be his last public appearance, and he was confident the rest of the Justice League could easily take his place. When pressed, he furthermore verified that Lex Luthor no longer posed any threat to humanity, having died in the explosion. Superman then took no further questions. Later on, we see Superman, well now in his Clark Kent alter ego, sitting in his office in the Daily Bugle. He's reflecting on recent events. Clark goes to grab a cup of coffee on his desk, and he accidentally knocks the cup over and gets coffee on his hands. And it hurts. He says, ow, signifying his powers are indeed gone. Superman then remembers back to what happened up there in space. Brainiac's body is exploding in a field of red energy. Lex, he grabbed Superman, who was weakened and powerless by then, and he flew as fast as he could. Superman asked, Lex, what are you doing? Lex answered, tell no one. Lex, He gave all he had, all he could do, to fly as fast as he could to save Superman and fly him outside of the blast radius, giving up his own life in the process. We see Lex's body disintegrate into bones and die, but Superman survived. Lex perhaps could have saved himself if he didn't save Superman here, but spending time with Superman over the last few days and seeing how selfless Superman was seemed to actually move Lex, and that is why he gave up his life to make sure Superman lived. But he still had some of his pride and didn't want it getting out, so he told Superman, "Tell no one." Back on Earth, Superman, now retired, living as Clark Kent, reflects on all these events, reflects on his past relationship with Lex, and when they were kids, and when they looked at a telescope into space, and how they bonded, and how they were friends. And with this, we end Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor. All right, so that was Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor. Let me go through my thoughts on this book. I thought the artwork by Bryan Hitch was great. Hitch is a great superhero artist, and he nails the big action set pieces that you want to see in this book, so great job there. I really enjoy the overall story here of Lex dying and going to Superman for help, and I think Waid just nails the characterization of everyone. He nails the Boy Scout, holier than thou positiveness that comes from Superman, always trying to do the right thing. And he also nails Lex being a jerk and scheming and being a pragmatist. And I loved the exploration of the relationship between Lex and Superman. Lex, he's so jealous of Superman. He has this irrational hatred of Superman that he always has. He just thinks Superman is looking down on the world, looking down on him. And throughout this story here, we sort of see that old friendship between Lex and Superman. And we see Lex sort of discovering the error of his ways and how Superman is actually this really altruistic force for good. And even Lex can't deny it at the end, because Superman goes to great lengths to save this great villain of his. And Superman, he even gives up his powers to save Lex's life. And, he's willing to give his greatest villain his powers. And, Lex could destroy the world, but Superman doesn't care because he's going to do whatever he can to save Lex's life. And Lex, in the end there, decides that he was wrong and he's going to do everything he can to save Superman's life. And he gives up his own life to do so. So Lex gets his redemption arc here. And it's kind of touching. So really amazing stuff in this book. Now, I do have a couple negatives. And sometimes the story seemed to go to a whole bunch of places that maybe it was longer than it had to be. Also, maybe Superman was a little bit too altruistic here. Did he really have to give up his powers to save Lex? Would Superman really do that? At some point, Superman does have to, weigh the pros and cons of things. Even Lex was saying at one point, look, are you being stupid? It's not worth 8 billion people dying on the planet just to save my life here. What are you thinking here? And anyway, even though there's a couple of nitpicky things in here, on the whole, I thought this was a triumph of a book and really solid stuff. And this is going down in my top 10 Superman stories of all time. So I really loved it. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and where you think this ranks in some of your all-time fave Superman stories. I'll see you all again in the future with more comics.